Okay, so we are making a new start. Today is day number one of our discussion on Pirkei Avot, and a couple of things about Pirkei Avot. I made a little video about this, but my introduction to Pirkei Avot came from a tailor. Next door to my apartment in Chicago was a little tailor shop. And every once in a while I would have problem with my clothes. Um, and and I would go into the tailor shop. And to be truthful, I started to find excuses to go into the tailor shop. And then finally I just sort of started to go in just because I liked the guy. And he was an old Jewish guy, wore a little fiddler cap or a Greek fisherman cap. Didn't look particularly religious. I wouldn't have identified him as a religious guy, but he's just a little guy, small guy. And I would go in there and I would, take care of whatever I had to take care of. Or I'd just sort of stop in to say hi to him. And he would say all this, like he would say something like super wise. He would just suddenly say out of the blue something super wise. And I would go, wow, you know, where did that come from? And years later, I was sitting in a very, very hot room in Madras, India. Now it's called Chennai. And I happened to open up my father's Siddur, the prayer book that my father had gotten for his bar mitzvah back in 19, whatever it was. He was born in 1929. You can do the math. And born in 1928. You can do the math. And I saw that there was Pirkei Avot inside that, and I started to read it, and I said, "Oh, this is all the stuff that old tailor was telling me." So the old tailor had taken it upon himself to teach me Pirkei Avot whenever I would kind of wander into his store. And that was really my beginning. Now, over the years, I've had a lot more opportunities to study Pirkei Avot. There's a custom to study Pirkei Avot during this time of year. So from Passover to Shavuot, the 7 weeks, Passover to Shavuot, I think it's almost a universal custom for people to study it on Shabbat. And Chabad Hasidim, and I think some others continue all the way into do a chapter a week. Um, and there are 6 chapters, so you can figure how many times that is, all the way until Rosh Hashanah. Um, and it's done various ways. I mean, sometimes there are classes, sometimes it's just recited. I'm in a Sephardic synagogue, a Moroccan synagogue primarily, and there they just read it. I mean, every week, they recite it. They go around. Each person does a verse, and they recite it like that. Other places, rabbis give classes and so forth, discussion groups, many different ways to do it. But it's really something which is worth doing. Uh, so as far as the book is concerned, there are lots and lots and lots of editions of the book. Now if you want, you can find a copy on Safaria, um, which I can actually put that. I should. A good man would put the Safaria on would put it in the chat. So let me quickly do that. Excuse the look on my face. That is the look of a man searching for something. And once I find it, uh, that's not what I want. That's not what I want at all. Here you go. And I'll put it up for you. And here we go. Okay. So this is, okay. Okay. So you'll find a copy in the chat. And thank you, by the way, for the greetings in the chat. I appreciate it. And welcome, by the way, to everybody from all wherever you may be. I know we have France in the house. Bienvenue. We have and we have Canada, and we have UK. So we're doing great. Okay. Um, but there are many other editions, many Bangladesh. Wow, I think that's a first. Um, we have many editions, many editions of Pirkei Avot. I would recommend this one if you wanna, if you can get it. It's the Koran Pirkei Avot. It's translated by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who uh, whose English is impeccable. I mean, he's just an incredible writer in English, and has a commentary, kind of a modern commentary by Rabbi Mark Angel, who is one of the great modern Orthodox thinkers of our time, and it's just a nice addition. But there are many editions coming from all sorts of different slants. My particular slant is Breslov. So there's a Breslov Pirkei Avot, which I highly recommend. It's great. It's a great book. It's a little big and a little expensive, but those of us who have old, tired eyes, that's not a bad thing. And it has some very nice things in it. Um, as far as our approach as to what we're going to do here, I don't know exactly. I've done it different ways. I hope that I will do as little talking as possible because I know that during my usual classes, I do a lot of talking and explaining and things like that. And maybe in this case, I can kind of sit back and relax a little bit and let you guys hash through it. Um, and discuss. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. If I'm going on and on and on, please feel free to interrupt me and to stop me. A little bit about what Pirkei Avot is, just an introduction, is that Pirkei Avot is a part of the Mishnah. Mishnah was composed in the first, I'm sorry, in the second century um, CE, and it's essentially a kind of legal code. For the most part, most part it's a legal code. It's a collection of rabbinic traditions. And if you can kind of imagine, imagine that there were like thousands and thousands and thousands of notebooks on points of Jewish law. And a small committee came together and said, okay, which ones of these are the most important? And cut those out and then pasted them, right? And pasted them into a book according to a specific order, right? And so it's like taking all that massive material and trying to bring order to it. And uh, so the Mishnah is a collection of these sayings of the rabbis, mostly on legal issues, and organized according to topic, right? According to topic, and that becomes the basis for the Talmud, right? So the Talmud is basically a long-ranging discussion, argument over a period of centuries about the Mishnah, primarily the legal parts of the Mishnah, plus stories and so forth. So okay, so Amin is already asking the best question. Is it considered part of the oral Torah? And so, yes, it's considered part of the oral Torah. And we're going to see how in Pirkei Avot, that's established in the very first line of Pirkei Avot, establishes it as part of the oral Torah. And Pirkei Avot is a section of the Mishnah that deals specifically with ethical and spiritual issues. So rather than legal issues, and rather than talking about legal issues, it's talking about spiritual and ethical issues in a more broad way. And and it does not have Talmud attached to it. So there's no long discussions and so forth. It's just the short statements, the Mishnayot, just the short Mishnahs um, in the language of the Mishnah, which is like a pretty simple Pretty simple Hebrew. One of the things about the Mishnah is that it's nice and clear, and Pirkei Avot is also nice and clear in many respects. Um, some of the ideas are challenging, but generally it's pretty clear. The language is clear. Clear enough. Somebody mentioned Maimonides before. Maimonides basically, in order to write his code of law, took the language of the Mishnah. So he basically recreated the language used in the Mishnah in order to write his code, in order to write a kind of Hebrew that people could really understand. Okay, so let's just dive in. Um, Let's just dive in to the very first Mishnah. So these are not really verses. People have a tendency to call them verses. They're not really verses. One, because they're not in any kind of meter, and second, because they're not kind of organized. They're not really verses in that sense. They're Mishnahs. So in the very first Mishnah, it says Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received the Torah from Sinai. Umsara Yeshua, and he passed it on to Yeshua. Yeshua lizkenim, and Yeshua to the elders. Uzkenim neviim, and the elders to the prophets. Neviim misra hala anshe knesset gedola, and the prophets handed it over, literally handed it on to the men of the great assembly. Hem amru shlosha dvarim, and they said three things. So what happens? So the very beginning. So the question that Amin asks is a great question. He says, "Well, is this oral Torah?" And anticipating that question, um, the very first Mishnah answers your question and says yes. And well, Michael has got a beautiful. What is that? I have to know what it
You
is.
become irritable when you go too long without an.
That's Marvin Martian, the Lorikeet. Say hi,
Oh,
Marvin.
okay,
Say hello.
he is gorgeous.
Thank you. He's very smart. He's almost 7 years old,
Okay, well, thank you for sharing him. He's gorgeous. Okay,
and he
so
came over to say hi. Sorry.
I have that effect on animals. Uh, ask Roxanne, she'll tell you, or cats, and they come. Okay, Um, so it starts out by saying that this is oral Torah. And it's a very good question because you might think like this is going to be kind of ethical stuff, it's kind of big stuff. Like it's not law, and but it establishes itself right off the bat as being, yes, this is part of oral Torah. And so it's talking about the men of the great assembly. This was this was towards uh, uh, this was after the land was re-entered after the first destruction of the temple. And here's what and they used to say three things. They used to say, "Havu mitunim badin." Be careful in judgment. Be careful in judgment. V'amidu tamidim harbe. Raise up many disciples. Ve'asu siag Torah, and make a fence for the Torah. Those were the three things. So one is to be very careful, to be careful in judgment. Now, honestly, here this is in a way you have to remember who the audience sometimes is, right? Sometimes the audience seems to be like that that Pirkei Avot is talking to rabbis, right? It's talking to rabbis. Although it also sometimes is not talking to rabbis, but it seems to be talking to rabbis here. It says, be careful in the way that you make judgments. Um, Raise up many disciples, right? It's very important. It's very important to make sure that and if you consider yourself to be a member of the Masorah, if you consider yourself to be a member of the chain of transmission of the Torah, right? Then you want to be very careful how you make your decisions. You want to be very careful to share what it is that you know, And then it says V'asu siag l'Torah. And the concept of siag l'Torah, of making a fence for the Torah, um, is a legal is a kind of legal concept, but also a personal ethical concept. So, as a legal concept, it means that part of your job as a in jurisprudence is to make sure that people don't violate the Torah by setting limits around what the Torah forbids. This is simple, simple one, right? So if Torah says that you're not allowed to, well, this is a really, I guess, probably one of the better examples, right? The Torah says that you're not allowed to have illicit sexual relationships. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, right, there are lots of things in place to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, those things themselves are not necessarily forbidden by the Torah, right? Those aren't necessarily forbidden by the Torah, but they become forbidden because they might lead to something that they shouldn't that they shouldn't lead to. So it's as if you're building a fence around the Torah. Now, I'm talking a lot, I know. That can be a little bit of a dangerous thing, right? It can be a little bit of a dangerous thing. If we look at the story of the story of Eve in the Torah, right? Adam and Eve, right? God says to Eve, "Don't eat from the tree," right? God doesn't eat from the tree. When she's speaking to the snake, she says, "God told me not to touch the tree." So the Midrash says that what did the snakes do? The snake pushed her into the tree, and she touches the tree, and he says, "Look, you see, nothing happened to you, right? Nothing happened to you." And she says, "Oh, I guess that's true, right? Nothing happened to me." Well, what she had done is she had made a fence around the Torah. She had made her own fence. She had expanded the prohibition, and by doing that, she had caused herself a lot of trouble. So you want to be careful about this process. But in for your own self, right? For your own self, it would mean that you want to figure out in your own life what sorts of things are likely to get you into trouble, right? And to build a fence around those things as is appropriate for you. So okay, now I've talked too much. Thoughts about the Mishnah before we move to the next one. Those three things: being careful in judgment, raising up a lot of disciples, a lot of students, and um,
To me,
being
it just
fast.
reminds me of like karma. You like put into the world what you get back. So you got to like be careful with how you treat people and talk. I see effects of that. Maybe I don't know, kind of similar.
Well, yeah, and you're gonna see the next one talks about also about how you treat people. It's going to be one of the things, by the way, that one of the big themes in Pirkei Avot is a lot of it is not about your relationship with God, but about your relationship with people. More thoughts, questions?
The thing about judgment, the thing about judgment, um, I'm not sure if I can verbalize this properly, but sometimes like like how you described how the snake was like, oh well, see, it's not forbidden and stuff. And sometimes we can like extend the fence. You talked about erecting a fence around the Torah. Well, sometimes we can like extend that fence and then get ourselves into trouble. I don't know if I communicated that properly, but sometimes we're like, see, no, we should be free to do this and that. And technically speaking, maybe we should be, but like you said, things lead to other things. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, there's often sometimes a big difference between something that you're permitted to do or can do, as opposed to what you should do, right? They may not always be the same thing. They may not always be the same thing. At the same time, you know, uh, of course, I speak from, from the kind of Orthodox world that I live in, and there, the fences sometimes are drawn so wide that they can make life very difficult to live, right? So you want to be careful. So you want to be careful about, how you make the fences. One of the things, by the way, he says about this thing about being mitunim, uh, in judgment, being deliberate means also being slow, right? It actually could be translated as being deliberate in the sense of being slow and careful. Um, and I think one of the problems with judgment, right, when we come to judge other people, is that we rush. We take we we're kind of like we're making the judgment even as the events are unfolding, as opposed to kind of, okay, let's sit back, let's pay attention, and let's see what's actually going on here before we make a judgment. So sometimes we're obligated to judge, right? Sometimes we're obligated to judge, but we should be judging with great care. So okay, more comments on that one, or should we just keep plowing through? Okay, I'm gonna plow through. I'm going on. Okay, Shimon HaTzadik. I'll tell you a little nice story about Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik. First of all, what a great thing to have the name Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon the Righteous. Shimon the Righteous. That's a good name to have. There's a story that when Alexander the Great, came to Jerusalem, um, Shimon Tzaddik, who was then the high priest, dressed up in all of his, yeah, yes, that is, oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. You are a tzaddik. Exactly. Um, so he dresses up in his full priest garb, right? He dresses up in his full priest garb, and he meets Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great bows to him, and all of his guys, all of Alexander the Great's guys, are get nervous. And they go, "Yo, sir, what are you doing?" He says, "This man," he says, "whenever I go into battle, if I see the image of this man, I know I'm going to be victorious." So he speaks to him with great respect, and he says to him, and he says, "Welcome, oh great Alexander, to Jerusalem." And he says, "Well, now that I'm here, um, I've heard that you have a temple here." And he says, "Yes." He says, "Well, my policy is that wherever I conquer, I want my statue to be put in the temple." And Shimon HaTzadik says, "Look, we don't do that. Okay, we don't put statues of people in our temple. That's not a thing. Okay, we're not going to do that." He says, "But I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal." It says, "We'll honor you in another way." It says, "From now on, our children will be named after you, right? We'll name children after you." And that's how Alexander became a Jewish name. And in fact, it's one of the few non-Jewish names to become a common Jewish name. I mean, you meet a lot of Jewish Alexanders or Senders. There's lots of there are different variations on it, but that's true. So just a story about Shimon HaTzadik. So he used to say, right, and this he used to say. I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, was this something that would be kind of his, this was his motto, possibly something that he would begin his classes with, something he would, it was the bumper sticker on his chariot. We don't know exactly. So he says he used to say, "Ashlosh dvarim olam omed." Now, if those words sound familiar to you, and what follows does not, it's because there's another Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, um, from Rabbi Akiva, which actually begins exactly the same way. So that's why. So we're going to get two different versions about what the world stands on. So the world stands on three things: al Torah, al HaTorah, on the Torah; al HaAvodah, on Avodah, worship. For you Arabic fans, ibadah. And al gemilut chasadim. The word gemilut, by the way, is related to the word jabal, jamila, right? This means something which is beautiful, something which is beautiful, and here it means acts of loving kindness. Um, Acts of loving kindness. The world stands on three. Yeah, I was gonna say, Lainey, the kids all learn this this song, right, in nursery school. So the world stands on three things: al Torah, on the Torah, on the Avodah, and on Gemilut Chasadim. So on Torah, the word Torah is used in different ways in Jewish sources. Sometimes narrowly to refer to the five books of Moses. Sometimes very broadly to refer to the entirety of spiritual learning. And I think that's what it means here. Here it means al haTorah. The Torah literally means instruction. So on the instruction, on all of those things, on everything that you could possibly learn that would be for your spiritual advancement and for your moral development, all of that is Torah. And al avodah. Avodah is anything that you do out of a desire to serve God. Anything that you do out of a desire to serve God is called avodah. Avodah in modern Hebrew, by the way, means work. Um, um, and it definitely has that sense of something which you do actively, right? The worship in the temple was referred to as avodah. When a person wakes up and they pray and they go to synagogue and they go so forth, that's also avodah, right? Uh, divine worship or service. And lastly, gemilut chasadim, which is acts of loving kindness. And just as a really important point is I think that it would be easy to conclude that the world stands only on Torah and worship. And I think there are a lot of religious people who think that that's true, right? Deep in their heart, they think, okay, if I'm learned, right? If I memorize a lot or if I study a lot and right, and I do the rituals, then I'm okay and I am, part of what's keeping up the world. But this is to say that there's really three things. It's not just my own self-development. It's not just the Torah that I'm learning. It's not just the worship that I'm engaging in, the prayers that I'm doing, but it's also the way I treat other people. And um, and in particular that I'm treating people with gemilut chesed, which means, acts which are beautiful in their kindness, right? Acts which are beautiful in their kindness. Um, and to treat people in a kind way, and that's one of the three pillars on which the world stands, right? The world needs that. It's absolutely essential. You can't. Now, then you could say, now there are other people who say, okay, well, I'm a good person. I do good things. I do good things for people, but I have no Torah, right? I'm not doing anything to improve myself, to improve myself spiritually, and I'm not engaging in any kind of relationship with God through service, right? And that's um, um, and uh, And that's also, right? That's also a table that's not going to stand. I like Lady said, as Cory Booker said, don't tell me about your religion, show me by your actions. Absolutely. And I think that's really important, right? And it's interesting, by the way, the order that it comes in. One of the things to think about when one of the things about Pirkei Avot is Pirkei Avot is very heavily edited. Unlike, right? Unlike unlike the Talmud. Okay, the Talmud is this free-ranging discussion, and you could be in the middle of a discussion about something, like about a legal thing, and it says, "Oh, and Shimon HaTzadik once said this," and it goes, "You know what? And let me tell you 10 stories about Shimon HaTzadik while you're here." And it goes on and tells you 10 stories about Shimon HaTzadik, and then it says, he also said about this other thing, and it goes off into a tangent. There are no tangents in Pirkei Avot. There's no tangent, um, the and the editing is very tight in the Mishnah in general, and particularly tight in Pirkei Avot. And so when we have a list like this, we also want to consider why the list is in this order. And if you think about it, here, this one is pretty clear, I think. Well, I think it's clear, but let me leave it to you. Okay, Torah, worship, and acts of loving kindness. What do you think determines that order? I'm not giving you a right. I don't think there's a right answer to this. So don't get scared. When I ask a question, I'm not fishing. Okay, I'm not, it's not a fishing expedition. I'm not expecting any particular answer. I have my own idea, but I don't know whether it's right or wrong. Maybe you think of something better than me.
Um, I'm not sure that in my head that there's like I think that acts that we do are sort of part of worship. So I don't really know, like to me, the distinction is not that great because I think that we worship God in the way that we move through the world and not the way we treat other creatures. I don't know if that's
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's an interesting point that um, that it puts avodah as being separate from gemilut chasadim, right? I might think that they might be the same, right? I mean, because after all, I mean, God commands us to behave towards people, right? In kind ways. So it's also avodah. Leah made the point that it's like from the most to least esoteric. That's right. It's kind of a movement out, so to speak, from Torah, which is inward, all the way to actions towards other people, which are outward.
Mm.
Mr. Sadiq.
Well, I think, in sort of in Islam as well, there's like a word amal, and amal means work,
Yes.
and you're judged by your good works, right? So, so every act, if you have the intention, say I'm going to be building a building, but I want that building to be good, have a good roof, it for the people I'm building it for, that's also worship. So any deed that you do can be worship. If you're helping a cat, it's hungry or thirsty or it's in trouble,
Hmm.
and you help it, that's an act of worship.
Right.
Because you're doing it for the Creator. You're doing it for He's created everything, His creation, and so you help it, and you're doing an act of worship. So even your intent, how you approach something. I mean, something like, say, for instance, when we're working, we're just typing on a computer. But if we're like doing it, helping our customer, that can be an act of worship.
Hmm.
So I think that's sort of how my father-in-law sees this thing. Like, the whole, like when you wake up till the time you go to bed, the whole day can be an act of worship if you do it the right way, if you have the good intent, and you want to help the creation. And sort of kind of helping the creation is worshiping God, worshiping the Creator who created everything.
That's
So
that's a very good point. I hadn't see. I told you somebody would come up with something I hadn't thought of. I mean, uh, these three categories are not. They overlap each other quite a lot, right? They overlap each other quite a lot. The business example clicked something in me. So there's a comment from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was a rabbi who lived in the 1600s, and people complained, that at that time that there were a lot of people who didn't, they weren't studying Torah. They weren't studying the law, but and they were in business trying to make a living. And somebody was kind of mocking those people and mocking the people who were just making a living. And the Baal Shem Tov said, he said, look, he says, you're sitting and you're studying about the laws of business, which are actually 3 volumes of the Talmud. The 3 biggest volumes of the Talmud are all about the laws of business, because business is very complicated. Money and stuff is very complicated, right? And different kinds of contracts and this and that. And he says, you're studying about this stuff. He says, but these people are doing it, right? These people are doing it. And if they're doing it with integrity, then they're getting the benefit that they're getting the benefit of your learning. He says, so they've taken, and to use the word, and by the way, the word amal is also Aramaic. So actually, in this discussion, yeah, that's a very common word in Aramaic. Also in the Talmud, also there is amal, right? They're taking that learning and they're translating it into amal, rather translating it into action, and that's their avodah. That's their service. So is it and to do that, right? To do that, if you think about it also, even a person who sells something, right? Who provides a service that people need or provides things that people need, and it could also be it's also an act of kindness. I mean,
Yeah.
I go to buy my bread. I need that bread. That's also so all of these things can be kind of they're not just they're not independent categories, but they're categories that kind of overlap with one another. I said that's another characteristic of them, I think. And I'm gonna guess that happens a lot with these categories whenever we get these lists, and we get a bunch of lists here, and I think we get the list that those are also can be overlapping.
I
So
think essentially with the Torah and also in Islam as well, there's not really any distinction between secular and sacred, because the secular is sacred. Like your everyday life, raising children, raising them well, that's sacred. And if you do a good job, that's also, I mean, if you're a good parent and you raise your children well, that's also something will be written in your good book, right? Your
but
Amal Nama.
right. Right. And by the way, and that's it's a good point. Remember, this is the second Mishnah. The first Mishnah established, right, the connection to Moses, right? You're saying, okay, you want to be connected to the revelation of Moses and Torah, right? You want to do this, right? Where do we come to? We come to Gemut Chasadim, to acts of kindness, right? So those acts of kindness, right? This is what the inheritors of Moses said was most important in the world, right? So the people were the inheritors of Moses, the people who were the students of the students of Moses, when they had to say what's most important in the world, they said Torah is important. Okay, that we understand. Avodah is important. That we understand because, right, because the Torah talks about all these sacrifices. And that okay, it makes sense. It says, but also you should understand Gemilut Chasadim, that the way that you treat other people says that's also important. That's also part of your service of God, and one of the pillars on which the world stands, right? If table doesn't have at least 3 legs, heaven help it. Um, right, and Gemilut Chasadim, right, is a recognition of a person being B'Tselem Elokim, a person being in the image of God, so to speak, right? By the way, there's a hadith also that says that man is in the image of God. It's interesting. And the word that's used in the hadith is the word surah, which is like even more like visually imaging, which is interesting. But obviously, we're not physically in the image of God, but we're in the image of God in the sense that we have godlike qualities. We have a soul which was breathed into us by God as a spark of God, and so therefore we are inherently right. Therefore human beings are inherently have the right to dignity and to honor and to acts of kindness.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So how do we know we have a soul? Is it just because we're different, intelligent and different from the animals, or what's the proof in Judaism?
Well, that's a good question. So Maimonides, when asked that question, he said, "Well, how?" He says that our rationality, right, that our ability to think, our ability to be self-aware, right, that's what makes us in the image of God, right? That's what tells us we have a soul. Um, Others would say it's our ability to choose, right? It's our ability to choose, our ability to make choices. That's a Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch said that. He says, what person makes a person in the image of God is that they have the ability to choose, right? Just as God is the ultimate chooser, right? God can make a world if he chooses. God can do whatever he wants, right? We, in a more limited way, right, are given the ability to do, to do what we want, and that's evidence of the soul. So,
So then we're saying we're part God. We're like part of the universe. We're one and the same.
meaning that
Ani Adonai.
we have, I don't want to go that far. I don't
That's
want to
just
go that
me.
far.
Don't
I don't
don't
get
don't
that
be
far.
me.
I don't want to get that far. But we have,
My bad. Sorry.
at least, this is the language of, you can talk to Rabbi Harlech about this. Okay, the
Okay.
language that's used by his rabbi 7 times was that we have a chelek, that we have a chelek Elokai mima'al mamash, that we have a piece of an actual piece of godlyhood inside of us. So what that means is when God creates man, right, he breathes inside of him a soul. Okay, so that means that we have a divine dimension, right? We have a divine dimension that is inside us and animates us. Now that doesn't make us God, God forbid, right? That doesn't make us God, but it means that we have an innate connection to God. And that is
Or
also
we have a godly duty on earth.
right. And we have a godly duty, we have a godly mission, and we also have an access, right? We also have an inner access to God, right? We not only have all the external doors, but we have a door inside, right? We have an internal connection to God also.
Is there a similar word like Khalifa in Arabic, like steward? Like we are successors, we are stewards of the
Yeah,
earth.
right. So this is right. And this is also like, uh, I'm trying
Not
to think of
owners,
the
but
word.
actually stewards.
Right. Yeah, not stewards. And this is very much, this is when God creates mankind, right? He basically, when God creates mankind and says, "Here's the garden," right? And your job is to protect and work the garden. And then he leaves the garden and he goes out into the world, right? Our job is to guard and protect the world, and we are therefore God's, vice regents in the world, right? We're like um, we're like the uh, caretakers, right? We're the caretakers of the world. We're not doing such a great job at it, I have to say, but hopefully we'll do better. So, Bezrat Hashem, inshallah, we'll do better, especially this week because we started. I'm not going to go any further because I always go 45 minutes because I don't believe that human beings can pay attention for more than 45 minutes. So we just did two Mishnahs. So we made a good start, or at least we made a start, and we'll continue again, Bezrat Hashem, please God, next week. So everybody knows how to find me. So if you have questions and you have things that, like, you think of something, you wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, wow, then you can please drop me a line and share. Okay.
Thanks,
Cool.
Lee. It's nice to
Okay.
finally meet you. I appreciate your posts and
My
everything.
pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to meet you, Yat Sadiq. Um, I go to a Sephardic synagogue, and when they don't know anybody's name, they always refer to them as Tzaddik.
I am sorry.
Tzaddik. Look at
And I
that.
think in Hebrew it also means charity because in sadaqah
Tzedakah. Right.
can be
Sadaka,
also
yeah,
a
yeah.
smile, in a smile, or anything good, I guess,
Anything
right?
good is tzedakah. So
Charity.
everything good is tzedakah.
Okay.
Okay, I wish you guys all a beautiful. I'll see some of you tomorrow, and I hope
What
you'll
time tomorrow?
1 o'clock also. And if you want, I'll send you send me a
Sure.
note and I'll send you the link. The link
No,
is
it's good for me because it's 11 p.m., 11:53 now. So it's like right before midnight. So now I can end the
beautiful,
class and go to sleep.
beautiful. Okay, so and nothing can put you to sleep like me. I'm apparently I'm very soothing, very soothing.
So
Okay,
hopefully a good work before going to sleep. Alhamdulillah.
Bezrat Hashem. Okay, bye guys.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.